Elena Morris rubbed her tired eyes as she hurried through the airport terminal. Her worn sneakers squeaked against the polished floor as she checked her watch for the 10th time. She was late again after working a grueling 12-hour night shift at Memorial Hospital. She had barely made it home to shower and throw on her already packed backpack before rushing to the airport. Gate 23B, she muttered to herself, squinting at the boarding pass on her phone. Her first vacation in 3 years, and she was already messing it up. Since her parents died in that horrific car accident 2 years ago, Elena's life had become an endless, exhausting cycle of work, bills, and taking care of her younger brother, Tommy. At 26, she felt more like 46. This weekend getaway to Atlantic City with her nursing school friend Megan was supposed to be her big break. 2 glorious days of no responsibilities, no mandatory overtime shifts, and no worrying about Tommy, who was thankfully staying with their aunt. Elena's phone buzzed. A text from Megan. "Where are you?" "They're boarding now." "Almost there?" Elena texted back, though she wasn't entirely sure where "there" was anymore. The airport signs blurred together as exhaustion clouded her vision. A measly 2 hours of sleep simply wasn't enough for anyone, especially someone who had spent the entire night monitoring critically ill ICU patients. Elena turned a corner and saw a small group of people gathered near a doorway. That must be it, she thought, her hopes lifting slightly. The sign above the doorway read, "Private Aviation Terminal." That didn't sound quite right, but she was far too tired to think clearly or question it. A woman in a crisp, professional uniform smiled warmly as Elena approached. "Miss Jenkins, we've been expecting you." Elena opened her mouth to correct her, but she was immediately interrupted by another uniformed staff member. "We are ready for boarding now. Mr. Carter is already on board." Elena blinked, utterly confused. Mr. Carter? Who was that? Before she could even form a coherent question, she was being gently but firmly guided down a walkway toward an aircraft that looked absolutely nothing like the cramped commercial planes she was accustomed to flying on. "Wait, I think there's been a mistake," Elena finally managed to say, but the flight attendant was already cheerfully taking her backpack from her. "Don't worry about a thing, Miss Jenkins. Mr. Carter understood you might be running a little late. He's very understanding." The interior of the jet made Elena's jaw drop in utter disbelief. Cream-colored leather seats, rich wood paneling, and what looked like a fully stocked bar greeted her. This was definitely not her budget flight to Atlantic City. A man sat with his back to her, gazing out the window. As the door closed behind her with a pressurized whoosh, he turned around. Elena's tired brain registered several things at once. He was younger than she expected, maybe around 30. He was wearing impeccably tailored clothes that probably cost more than her monthly rent. And he was strikingly handsome in a way that made her suddenly self-conscious about her faded jeans and simple t-shirt. His eyes widened slightly as he saw her, then narrowed in what seemed like genuine curiosity. "You're not Vanessa Jenkins," he stated, his voice calm and assured. It wasn't a question. "No, I'm Elena Morris," she replied, instinctively clutching her phone like a lifeline. "And I think I just accidentally got on the wrong plane." The man's serious expression softened, and a small, almost amused smile appeared on his face. It would seem so. The engines of the plane hummed to life, and Elena felt a surge of panic rising in her chest. "I need to get off this plane. I'm supposed to be on a flight to Atlantic City with my friend. I'm afraid we're already cleared for takeoff," he said, gesturing toward the window where the ground crew was already moving away from the aircraft. "I'm Damien Carter, by the way. Where is this plane even going?" Elena asked, sinking into the seat opposite him as her legs suddenly felt too weak to support her weight. "Paris," Damien replied simply. "Paris, as in Paris, France?" Elena's voice rose an octave in disbelief. Damien nodded, studying her with undisguised interest. "You really did get on the wrong plane, didn't you?" "I don't even have a passport," Elena exclaimed. Then she immediately remembered that she actually did. It was buried somewhere deep in her backpack, practically unused since that one college trip to Canada years ago. "The staff obviously thought you were my companion for the trip," Damien explained, choosing his words carefully. Vanessa Jenkins is a model I occasionally date. We were supposed to spend the weekend in Paris, but it seems she's been replaced. The full reality of the absolutely bizarre situation hit Elena like a ton of bricks. She was currently sitting on a private jet headed to Paris with a complete stranger who mistakenly thought she was a model, and the plane was already taking off. "This can't be happening," she mumbled, running her hands distractedly through her messy brown hair. "I need to call Megan. I need to figure out how to get back home. I need to breathe." "I think you left out 'need to breathe,'" Damien finished for her, his voice surprisingly gentle. He then handed her a glass of ice water that seemed to materialize from thin air. "Drink this. It will help." Elena took the water with shaking hands. "Mr. Carter." "Damien, please." "Damien, I absolutely cannot go to Paris. I have a shift at the hospital on Monday. I have my brother to take care of. I have responsibilities." Something in Damien's expression shifted subtly at the word responsibilities. He leaned back in his seat, studying her more intently. "What exactly do you do, Elena Morris?" "I'm a nurse at Memorial Hospital," she replied automatically. "Intensive care unit." Damien nodded slowly. "And the brother you mentioned? Tommy?" "He's 18. Our parents died 2 years ago, and I'm all he has." The words tumbled out of her mouth before she could consciously stop them. Why was she practically spilling her entire life story to this complete stranger? The plane was now rapidly taxiing down the runway, quickly picking up speed. "I understand responsibility," Damien said, his voice taking on a noticeably more somber tone. "More than most people realize." For a long moment, they sat in comfortable silence as the plane smoothly lifted into the air. Elena felt a strange, unnerving mix of terror and something else. A feeling she couldn't quite put her finger on or name. "Look," Damien finally said as the plane leveled off. "We're going to Paris whether we like it or not at this point. Once we land, I can personally ensure you're on the very first flight back to wherever you need to go." "You'd really do that?" Elena asked, genuinely surprised by his unexpected offer. "Of course. This entire mix-up certainly isn't your fault." He paused for a moment, then added with a hint of that earlier smile playing on his lips. "Though I'm undeniably curious how you managed to get through private aviation security and onto my plane." Elena felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment. "I was so tired. I had just finished a brutal night shift, and I've barely slept. I saw a small crowd of people gathered at a gate and simply followed them. No one stopped me or asked for identification of any kind. Someone even called me Miss Jenkins. I tried to correct them, but everything happened so incredibly fast." Damien shook his head slowly, looking almost impressed despite himself. "Well, Miss Morris, it seems you've inadvertently infiltrated a state-of-the-art security system that costs millions to maintain." For the first time since boarding the private jet, Elena actually laughed. It was a small, tired laugh, but it effectively broke some of the palpable tension that had filled the cabin. The attentive flight attendant then appeared with a tray of delicious-looking food that made Elena suddenly realize just how incredibly hungry she was. As Damien motioned for her to help herself, she cautiously took a sandwich that looked infinitely fancier than any food she'd eaten in months. "So," Damien said, watching her with those intense, unwavering eyes, "tell me about being a nurse." Elena wasn't entirely sure why, but she simply started talking. Maybe it was the lingering exhaustion, or the sheer absurdity of the entire situation, or the simple fact that Damien Carter was actually listening, truly listening, in a way that made her feel like her words genuinely mattered. She told him all about her long, demanding shifts, about the patients she'd successfully helped save, and the ones she sadly couldn't. She poured her heart out, telling him about struggling to somehow pay Tommy's college application fees, while desperately trying to keep up with the overwhelming mortgage their parents had left behind. In turn, Damien shared small, carefully chosen pieces of himself. He told her that he ran a highly successful technology company. He traveled frequently for work and leisure, and he'd recently lost someone incredibly close to him, his business partner and best friend, though he didn't elaborate on the exact circumstances. "Is that why you're going to Paris?" Elena asked tentatively. "To get away from everything?" Damien looked genuinely surprised by her astute insight. Perhaps, though I'm honestly not sure there's anywhere far enough to truly escape grief. Hours passed by quickly, and Elena felt herself gradually drifting off to sleep in the surprisingly comfortable seat. She instinctively fought to keep her heavy eyes open, worried about what might happen if she allowed herself to let her guard down, even for a moment. "You should definitely rest," Damien said quietly, noticing her valiant struggle to stay awake. "We still have several hours before we land in Paris. Just close your eyes." "I simply can't just fall asleep on a complete stranger's private jet," Elena protested weakly. "I think we've moved past the point of being complete strangers," Damien replied, a hint of amusement in his voice. "Besides, I promise to be a perfect gentleman." There was something in his tone that made Elena inexplicably believe him. Despite all logical reasons not to, she found herself trusting him. "Just a short nap," she conceded, her eyelids already feeling far too heavy to keep open. She quickly drifted off to a surprisingly peaceful sleep. As she drifted off, Elena had the strange, fleeting thought that maybe, just maybe, getting on the wrong plane wasn't actually the worst mistake she'd ever made in her incredibly hectic life. When Elena woke up, the world outside the plane window had changed dramatically. Soft, fluffy blankets of white clouds floated peacefully beneath them, beautifully tinged pink and orange by the setting sun. For a brief moment, she completely forgot where she was, and then it all came rushing back to her. Paris, Damien, the private jet. She quickly straightened up in her seat, embarrassed to discover that a soft, luxurious blanket had been thoughtfully placed over her while she slept soundly. Damien was sitting comfortably across from her, diligently working on a sleek laptop. "Welcome back," he said without even looking up from the screen. "You've been asleep for almost 6 hours. 6 hours? Elena couldn't even remember the last time she had slept that long, let alone uninterrupted. "You clearly needed it," Damien replied, finally closing his laptop and giving her his full attention. "We'll be landing in Paris in about an hour or so." Reality crashed down on Elena again with full force. "I absolutely need to call my brother and Megan. They must both be worried sick about me." Damien calmly handed her a cell phone. "It has international service. Take all the time you need." Elena dialed Tommy's number first, feeling extremely relieved when he answered almost immediately. "Elena, where are you? Megan called here earlier looking for you. What's going on?" "Tommy, you are absolutely not going to believe this," Elena said, glancing at Damien, who had diplomatically moved to give her some much-needed privacy. "I accidentally got on the wrong plane." "The wrong plane? What does that even mean?" "It means I'm currently on my way to Paris, France." The silence on the other end of the line lasted so long that Elena actually thought they'd been disconnected. "Tommy, are you still there? You're in Paris? My sister, who hasn't taken a single day off work in the past 2 years, is somehow in Paris?" "Almost in Paris," Elena quickly corrected. "It was a total accident. I'm coming right back home." "An accident? How does someone accidentally go to Paris?" Elena sighed heavily. "It's complicated, Tommy. I'll explain everything in excruciating detail when I get back home. Are you going to be okay until then? Is Aunt Carol treating you right?" "I'm 18 years old, Elena, not 8. I'm perfectly fine. But, you're really in Paris right now? That's actually kind of cool." "It's not cool at all. It's a total disaster," Elena insisted, though a small, traitorous part of her couldn't help but agree with her brother. "Who are you even with?" Tommy asked, his tone suddenly sounding suspicious. Elena lowered her voice to a near whisper. "The owner of the plane, I guess. His name is Damien Carter." "Wait a minute. Damien Carter? As in the Damien Carter? The tech genius? The billionaire?" "What? No, just a businessman named Damien. Look, Tommy, I have to go. I promise I'll call you the second I land." "Okay, just be careful." After hanging up with Tommy, Elena reluctantly called Megan, who was understandably far less understanding of the absolutely insane situation. After confirming that Elena was at least physically safe and unharmed, Megan berated her relentlessly for ruining their long-awaited weekend plans before eventually breaking down and laughing hysterically at the sheer absurdity of it all. "Only you, Elena," Megan said, still chuckling. "Only you could work a double shift and then accidentally end up on a private jet headed straight to Paris." When Elena finally handed the phone back to Damien, she felt slightly calmer than she had a few moments earlier. "Thank you so much. Is everything okay back home?" he asked with genuine concern. "Yes, everything's fine. There's just a lot of explaining that I need to do." Elena paused hesitantly, then added, "My brother seems to think he knows exactly who you are. He called you a tech genius and a billionaire." Something subtle flickered across Damien's face. "Discomfort, maybe? I own a relatively successful technology company," he said carefully, choosing his words deliberately. "Your brother may have read an article or two about it somewhere." Before Elena could ask any more probing questions, the plane began its smooth descent, and the dazzling lights of Paris appeared below them. Countless twinkling stars spreading out in every possible direction. "It's beautiful," Elena whispered, almost reverently pressing her face against the cool window. "It truly is," Damien agreed softly, but when she turned her head to look at him, she realized he wasn't looking at the twinkling city lights at all. He was looking directly at her. The private jet touched down smoothly at Charles de Gaulle Airport. Elena felt her heart begin racing as the sheer reality of being in Paris, actually in Paris, began to sink in. This wasn't supposed to happen to people like her. People who worked endless double shifts, clipped coupons religiously, and worried constantly about making rent each and every month. "We'll be escorted through a private terminal," Damien explained as the plane smoothly taxied to a complete stop. "There won't be any tedious customs lines to deal with." Elena nervously clutched her worn backpack even tighter. "Is that even legal?" Damien's lips curved into a small, enigmatic smile. "Just one of the many perks of private travel, Miss Morris." A sleek, black car was already waiting for them on the tarmac. The driver, a middle-aged Frenchman named Michel, greeted Damien with familiar respect and Elena with polite, but definitely curious, glances. "To the hotel, sir?" Michel asked smoothly as he held the car door open for them. "Yes, please, Michel," Damien replied, then turned his attention to Elena. "Unless you'd prefer to go straight to the airport to catch a return flight back home, of course." Elena hesitated, torn between the two options. The sensible, responsible thing to do would be to turn right around immediately and head straight back home to Tommy and her demanding job and her overwhelming responsibilities. But the enchanting lights of Paris glowed enticingly in the distance, and something deep inside her rebelled fiercely at the very thought of leaving without seeing at least a tiny glimpse of the magical city she'd dreamed about visiting since she was a little girl. Maybe I could just stay for the night." The words tumbled out of her mouth before she could consciously stop them. "My next shift at the hospital isn't until Monday evening." Surprise flickered across Damien's handsome face, quickly followed by something that looked suspiciously like genuine pleasure. "The hotel has plenty of rooms available. You'd have your own private space, of course." "I absolutely couldn't possibly let you pay for it, Damien." Damien gently cut her off mid-sentence. "You're here because of a mix-up that certainly wasn't your fault in any way. Let me at least make sure you're comfortable before you head back home." Too exhausted to argue further and undeniably too tempted to refuse his incredibly generous offer, Elena simply nodded her head in quiet agreement. "Thank you," she whispered. The car then glided silently through the streets of nighttime Paris, and Elena found herself instinctively pressing her face against the window like a wide-eyed child. The iconic Eiffel Tower sparkled brilliantly in the distance, and elegant buildings lined the wide, picturesque boulevards. "It's even more beautiful than I ever imagined it would be," she whispered breathlessly. "When was the last time you traveled anywhere?" Damien asked softly, watching her awestruck reaction with undisguised interest. "A quick trip to Canada during nursing school," she replied. "About 6 years ago." Elena turned to look directly at him. "I'm guessing you travel all the time, don't you?" "Far too much," he admitted with a sigh. "It lost its magic a long time ago." "That's incredibly sad," Elena said simply. Damien looked at her thoughtfully for a long moment. Maybe it is. The luxurious hotel was unlike anything Elena had ever seen, even in movies. The grand lobby gleamed impeccably with polished marble floors and glittering crystal chandeliers, and the attentive staff seemed to materialize instantly out of thin air to assist them with anything they needed. "Mr. Carter, welcome back to La Royale." The impeccably dressed manager greeted them warmly. "We've prepared the presidential suite, as per your usual request." "Thank you, Jean-Paul. We'll also need a separate room for Ms. Morris." Jean-Paul barely even blinked at the sudden change in plans. "Of course, sir. We have a lovely junior suite available on the very same floor." Elena followed along in a complete daze as they were escorted to a private elevator with ornate, gold-plated doors. Her lavish room, a junior suite that was significantly bigger than her entire cramped apartment back home in New Jersey, featured a private balcony with a breathtaking, unobstructed view of the iconic Eiffel Tower and a luxurious bathroom with a soaking tub she could practically swim in. "Is everything satisfactory, Ms. Morris?" Jean-Paul asked politely as the bellhop carefully delivered her worn backpack. Elena simply nodded her head, not fully trusting herself to actually speak without stammering. "Mr. Carter has already arranged for a curated selection of clothes to be delivered to your room first thing in the morning," he continued smoothly. "If you require anything at all, please simply dial 0 on the telephone." After they had finally left her alone, Elena sank onto the edge of the plush, king-sized bed, completely overwhelmed by everything. She'd somehow gone from frantically rushing to catch a budget flight to Atlantic City to staying in a ridiculously luxurious hotel in Paris in less than 24 hours. It honestly felt like she'd accidentally stumbled headfirst into someone else's very glamorous and privileged life. Her phone buzzed softly with a new text message from Damien. "Breakfast at 9 tomorrow. The hotel restaurant is on the roof. Incredible views that you won't want to miss." Elena hesitated for a long moment before cautiously typing back a short reply. "Okay, but I absolutely need to figure out a flight back home for tomorrow." His reply came almost instantly. "We'll sort everything out in the morning. Sleep well, Elena." Despite her utter exhaustion, Elena still found it surprisingly hard to fall asleep. The ridiculously soft bed was just too soft, the opulent room was just too quiet, and the entire situation was just too completely surreal. She kept expecting to suddenly wake up back in her cramped and cluttered bedroom in New Jersey, running impossibly late for her next demanding shift at the hospital. When she finally drifted off into a fitful sleep, she dreamed of flying effortlessly over dazzling cities of light, with Damien Carter's mysterious, captivating eyes watching her intently from across endless, starlit skies. Morning came quickly. With golden sunlight streaming brightly through the sheer curtains she'd completely forgotten to close the night before. For a brief moment, Elena felt completely disoriented. Then, as before, it all came rushing back to her. Paris, the private jet, Damien Carter. A quick glance at her phone showed it was already 8:30 in the morning. She had somehow managed to sleep for nearly 10 solid hours, something she hadn't done in years, if ever. Elena quickly rushed to take a desperately needed shower, wincing slightly as she put back on the exact same clothes from yesterday. As promised, at precisely 9 o'clock, there was a polite knock at her door. A uniformed hotel employee stood there holding several garment bags and boxes. "Compliments of Mr. Carter, Ms. Morris," the woman explained smoothly in lightly accented English. "He thought you might greatly appreciate some fresh clothes for the day." Before Elena could even begin to protest, the bags and boxes were carefully laid across her bed, and the woman was gone as quickly as she had arrived. Inside, she found several simple, yet clearly incredibly expensive, outfits, all mysteriously in her exact size. Perfectly fitting jeans, soft blouses, elegant dresses, even shoes and delicate undergarments. The thought of Damien actually selecting underwear for her made her face burn bright red with embarrassment, though she strongly suspected that he had probably had an assistant handle the actual shopping. Elena quickly chose the least fancy option. Dark wash jeans and a soft, sky blue sweater that felt like a cloud against her skin. She honestly couldn't even remember the last time she'd worn anything new that wasn't a standard, ill-fitting hospital uniform. The rooftop restaurant simply took her breath away. Floor-to-ceiling glass walls provided a stunning panoramic view of all of Paris bathed in the warm morning light. The sprawling city spread out beautifully below them like a breathtaking, living postcard. Damien was already seated comfortably at a corner table, deeply engrossed in reading something on a sleek tablet. He looked up as she approached, and for a fleeting second, Elena saw something almost unreadable flicker across his face. Genuine appreciation, maybe, or simply mild surprise. "You look incredibly rested, Elena," he said softly, standing politely to pull out her chair. "The clothes fit okay, then?" "Yes, they're perfect. Thank you so much, but you really didn't have to do all of this," Elena stammered, feeling flustered. "I wanted to," he said simply, effectively cutting off her somewhat awkward protest. "Consider it a small apology for the mix-up that brought you here." An attentive waiter then appeared with a steaming pot of rich, dark coffee and a tray of freshly baked pastries that immediately made Elena's mouth water. As they ate, Damien explained that he had managed to get her a seat on a direct flight back to New York the following evening. "Tomorrow?" Elena asked, genuinely surprised. "Not today. All of the direct flights were completely full," Damien said quickly, pointedly not quite meeting her questioning eyes. "Unless, of course, you'd much prefer a connecting flight through London or Frankfurt. I can easily arrange that for you instead." Elena knew she should have insisted on leaving immediately. That would have been the most responsible and sensible thing to do. But the almost irresistible thought of having just one full day, only one single glorious day, in Paris was simply too tempting to ignore. "Tomorrow is perfectly fine," she said softly, feeling a strange, conflicting mixture of both overwhelming guilt and undeniable excitement. "I'll call Tommy later and let him know about the change of plans." "Good," Damien said, looking genuinely pleased by her answer. "Then I have a proposal for you, Elena." Elena raised an eyebrow slightly, suddenly feeling unexpectedly wary. "Nothing even remotely improper, I assure you," he added quickly, noticing her apprehensive expression. "I thought perhaps I could show you Paris today. The real Paris, not just the typical touristy sites and attractions." "Why would you even want to do that?" Elena asked, genuinely puzzled. "You must have far better and more important things to do than play tour guide for a complete stranger all day long." Damien carefully set down his coffee cup, considering her perfectly valid question with serious thoughtfulness. "Because, for the first time in a very long time, I'm actually curious about something, or someone other than myself or my seemingly endless work." His unexpected honesty caught her completely off guard. "I honestly don't understand," she admitted quietly. "You're different, Elena Morris. You obviously didn't recognize me when we first met on the plane. You don't seem particularly impressed by the private jet or the lavish hotel or any of this." He gestured around them with a sweep of his hand. "Do you even realize how incredibly rare that is in my world?" "I'm just a normal person, Damien," Elena said with a shrug. "Exactly," Damien replied with a genuine smile that completely transformed his handsome face, making him look noticeably younger and significantly less guarded. "So, what do you say, Elena? One full day in Paris with a not entirely normal person?" Against her very best judgment, Elena found herself actually smiling back at him. "Okay, Damien. One day in Paris." They started their impromptu tour at a small, hidden cafe tucked away on a quiet side street, where Damien confidently ordered for them both in fluent French. The friendly cafe owner greeted him warmly like an old friend, kissing him lightly on both cheeks and casting curious, but ultimately kind, glances at Elena. "Do you come to Paris often?" Elena asked as they sipped rich espresso at a tiny table on the sidewalk. "I actually lived here for a while after college," Damien explained casually. "Before I started the company with—" He trailed off abruptly, a sudden, fleeting shadow crossing his face. "With your friend," Elena prompted gently. "The one you mentioned earlier on the plane?" Damien nodded slowly, his relaxed expression suddenly closing off tightly. "Mark." His name was Mark Fitzgerald. The way he had said the name with a subtle mixture of both obvious pain and deep reverence told Elena instinctively that this was a subject she needed to approach both carefully and respectfully. "What was he like?" she asked softly. For a long moment, she honestly thought that Damien wasn't going to answer at all. Then, speaking almost in a whisper, he finally said, "Brilliant, fearless, the very best person I have ever known in my entire life." "I'm so sorry for your loss, Damien," Elena said quietly, recognizing the raw grief lingering in his tone. Damien looked at her sharply, almost defensively. "I didn't actually say that he died. You didn't have to, Damien." Working in the intensive care unit had sadly given Elena an intimate familiarity with profound loss. Simply in the way you talk about him. Damien was quiet for a long, uncomfortable moment. "It happened a year ago. A climbing accident in Colorado. We'd been best friends since college. We built the entire company together from absolutely nothing." He then took a deep, steadying breath. "After he died, I honestly couldn't bear to be in the office anymore. Everything there constantly reminded me of him." "So you just started traveling?" Elena guessed gently. "Running, more like it," Damien replied, his genuine smile now tinged with bitterness. "Not particularly brave of me, is it?" "Grief isn't actually about bravery, Damien," Elena said softly. "It's simply about basic survival." Damien looked at her then with renewed and genuine interest. "You sound like you actually know something about that." "My parents died just 2 years ago," she said quietly. "Car accident." The words still hurt to say out loud, but the initial sharp stabbing pain had gradually dulled to a persistent, dull ache. "That's when I suddenly became solely responsible for Tommy." "How old was he at the time?" 16, she replied. "Far too young to lose both of his parents, but then again, who truly isn't?" They both sat in comfortable silence for a long moment, intimately connected by the shared, unspoken experience of overwhelming loss in a way that Elena definitely hadn't expected when she had first boarded that fateful plane. "Come on," Damien said finally, standing up from the small table and offering her his hand. "I want to show you something special." He then led her through a maze of winding cobblestone streets to a small, completely hidden garden tucked away peacefully behind an ancient, centuries-old church. Spring flowers bloomed in wild profusion, and a weathered stone bench sat invitingly beneath a beautiful, blossoming cherry tree. "I used to come here often to think whenever I lived in Paris," Damien explained softly. "Very few actual tourists even know about it, so it's almost always completely empty." They both sat silently on the old stone bench, watching as delicate pink petals drifted down gently around them like soft snowflakes. "It's incredibly peaceful here," Elena said quietly, feeling some of the constant tension finally begin to slowly leave her perpetually tense shoulders. "Mark and I once had a half-serious plan to retire together in Paris," Damien said wistfully, looking up at the flowering branches above them. "We were going to buy apartments in the same building, grow old, complaining about young people in French." Elena smiled, picturing it. "That sounds nice." "It was never going to happen," Damien confessed. "We were both too obsessed with the company. Always one more project, one more deal." He shook his head ruefully. "Now, I'd give anything to have that time back." Elena understood that feeling perfectly. How often had she picked up extra shifts, missing Tommy's soccer games or school events, always telling herself there would be more time later. "We can't change the past," she said softly. "Believe me, I've tried." Damien looked at her with those penetrating eyes that seemed to see right through her. "What would you change if you could?" "I'd have spent more time with my parents," Elena admitted, a pang of regret hitting her. "Especially in those last few years. I was so busy with nursing school and then my career that I just assumed they'd always be there." "That's the trap, isn't it?" Damien said quietly, almost to himself. "We're always looking forward, never at what's right in front of us." For a fleeting moment, their eyes locked, and Elena felt something shift between them. A connection that went beyond polite conversation between strangers. The spell was broken by the sound of a church bell ringing nearby. "Hungry?" Damien asked, standing and offering his hand again. This time, Elena took it without hesitation. They spent the rest of the afternoon wandering through parts of Paris that Elena suspected most tourists never saw. Local markets bustling with activity, hidden courtyards overflowing with flowers, and tiny, charming bookshops and art galleries tucked away in historic buildings. Damien seemed like a completely different person here, far away from the private jets and luxury hotels of his usual life. He was more relaxed, more open, and even occasionally funny. He told her stories about his college days with Mark, about their first disastrous business venture, a food delivery app that crashed spectacularly on its first day, and about how they finally struck gold with their security software company, Damark Technologies. In return, Elena shared stories about growing up in a small town in New Jersey, about her decision to become a nurse after her grandmother's illness, and about Tommy's dreams of becoming a doctor. "He's smart enough," she said proudly as they strolled along the Seine in the late afternoon light. "He got accepted to several good pre-med programs. I'm just worried about the cost." "Scholarships?" Damien asked. "Some, but not enough. I've been taking extra shifts to help with tuition," she said, her voice trailing off, not wanting to bring the mood down with her financial worries. Damien frowned slightly, but he didn't press the issue. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, they found themselves at a small, unassuming restaurant on a quiet street in Montmartre. The owner greeted Damien warmly and led them to a cozy corner table adorned with a flickering candle and a small vase of fresh flowers. "I hope you like authentic French cuisine," Damien said as they settled in. "Marcel doesn't believe in menus. He just cooks whatever's fresh that day." The food was incredible, simple but exquisitely prepared dishes that made Elena close her eyes in appreciation with every single bite. Damien ordered a bottle of wine that probably cost more than her weekly grocery budget, but she decided not to dwell on that. "Why nursing?" Damien asked as they lingered over dessert, a delicate chocolate soufflé that practically melted on Elena's tongue. "I like helping people," she said with a casual shrug, "and I'm good at staying calm in emergencies." "That's it? No dramatic story? Tell me about a childhood illness or a TV show that inspired you," Damien teased. Elena laughed. "Sorry to disappoint you. Not everything has to have a dramatic backstory. In my experience, the most important choices usually do," Damien countered. Elena thought about it for a moment, her expression softening. "Well, there was my grandmother. She got sick when I was in high school, cancer. The nurses who took care of her were amazing. They made a terrible situation bearable, not just for her, but for our whole family." She paused, lost in thought. "One night when Grandma was in a lot of pain, this nurse named Sarah sat with us for hours after her shift ended. She didn't have to do that, but she did. I wanted to be that person for someone else." Damien was watching her with such warmth in his eyes that Elena's heart skipped a beat. "What?" she asked, feeling suddenly self-conscious. "You're remarkable, Elena Morris," he said softly. "You know that, right?" Elena felt her cheeks flush. "I'm really not. I'm just doing my best with what I've got." "Which is exactly what makes you remarkable." Damien reached across the table and gently touched her hand. "Most people in your position would be bitter or looking for an escape, but you just keep going, taking care of everyone around you." "I don't have a choice," Elena said, though she didn't pull her hand away. "We always have choices," Damien countered. "You've chosen to be strong when it would be easier not to be." The way he was looking at her made Elena feel both seen and exposed in a way that was both thrilling and terrifying. This man, this wealthy, complicated, grieving man, seemed to understand her better after one day than people she'd known for years. As they walked back to the hotel under a sky full of stars, Elena found herself wishing that tomorrow would never come, that she could stay in this magical bubble of Paris with Damien Carter, where real life and all its problems seemed very far away. But reality was waiting, and tomorrow she would be back on a plane, heading home to her normal life of hospital shifts, bills, and taking care of Tommy. This enchanting day would fade into a strange story to tell, a memory that would seem less real with each passing year. Back at the hotel, Damien walked her to her room door. "Thank you for today," Elena said, suddenly feeling shy. "It was perfect." "The pleasure was all mine," Damien replied, his voice low. He hesitated, then added, Would you have dinner with me again tomorrow before your flight? There's another place I'd like to show you. Elena knew she should say no. Spending more time with Damien would only make it harder to leave. But the thought of one more evening in his company was too tempting to resist. I'd like that, she said softly. For a long moment, they stood there, the air between them thick with unspoken possibilities. Then, Damien leaned down and pressed a gentle kiss to her cheek. Good night, Elena, he whispered, his breath warm against her skin. Good night, Damien, she replied, her voice barely audible. As she closed the door behind her, Elena leaned against it, her heart pounding. What was she doing? Getting involved with someone like Damien Carter could only lead to heartbreak. They lived in completely different worlds. And yet, as she got ready for bed, Elena couldn't stop smiling. For the first time in years, she felt truly alive. Not just surviving, but living. That night, she dreamed of Paris streets, Damien's smile, and possibilities she'd never dared to imagine before. Elena woke to sunlight streaming through her hotel room window and the distant sounds of Paris traffic. For a moment, she lay still, savoring the softness of the sheets and the lingering memory of walking along the Seine with Damien. Her phone buzzed insistently on the nightstand. A text from Tommy. *How's Paris with your billionaire? Send pics. Elena smiled and shook her head. Her brother had always had an overactive imagination. She quickly typed back, he's not my anything, and I'll be home tomorrow. Another buzz. * looked him up online. Damien Carter is worth like $4 billion. His company makes security software. There are pics of him with celebrities and everything. Elena frowned, sitting up in bed. *4 billion? That couldn't be right. She grabbed her phone and typed, Damien Carter Tech CEO, into the search bar. Hundreds of results appeared instantly, images of Damien at charity galas, tech conferences, and business awards. Articles about Danmark Technologies and its revolutionary security systems. Lists of 30 under 30 and most eligible tech bachelors. One headline caught her eye. Tech billionaire Damien Carter retreats from public eye after partner's death. Elena clicked on it, her heart racing. The article, dated 8 months ago, described how Damien had become increasingly reclusive after the tragic death of Mark Fitzgerald in a climbing accident. The company's stock had taken a hit as rumors swirled about Damien's mental state and the future of Danmark Technologies. There was even speculation about Damien selling his shares and walking away from the empire he'd built with his late friend. Oh my God, Elena whispered, sinking back against the pillows, stunned. She wasn't just hanging out with some random rich guy. Damien Carter was apparently one of the wealthiest men in America, the kind of person who appeared on magazine covers and financial news shows, and he'd let her think he was just an ordinary businessman. Elena felt a wave of embarrassment wash over her. Had he been laughing at her naivete this whole time, playing some kind of game with the clueless nurse who'd stumbled onto his private jet? Her phone buzzed again with another text from Tommy. *Hello? Are you dating a billionaire? I am not dating anyone, Elena typed back furiously. And I'll explain everything when I get home. A knock at the door startled her. Wrapping herself in the plush hotel robe, Elena peered through the peephole to see a hotel staff member with a rolling cart. Breakfast, Ms. Morris? The young woman announced cheerfully when Elena opened the door. Compliments of Mr. Carter. Before Elena could protest, the woman wheeled in a cart laden with fresh pastries, fruit, coffee, and a small vase holding a single perfect red rose. Mr. Carter asked me to inform you that he has a business meeting this morning but hopes you'll join him for lunch at noon in the lobby, the woman said, handing Elena a small envelope. After she left, Elena opened the envelope and found a handwritten note. Elena, business calls, unfortunately. Feel free to explore the hotel or rest this morning. The concierge can arrange anything you need. Looking forward to lunch and showing you more of Paris before your flight tonight. Damien. Elena set the note down, her feelings a complicated mix of anger, confusion, and, she had to admit, a lingering attraction that hadn't been completely extinguished by her discovery of Damien's true status. She ate the breakfast, which was delicious despite her inner turmoil, then showered and dressed in another of the outfits that had been delivered. A simple sundress that fit her perfectly. Instead of waiting in her room, Elena decided to explore the hotel. The concierge offered to arrange a spa treatment or a private shopping excursion, but she politely declined, preferring to wander the elegant public spaces on her own. In a quiet corner of the hotel's library, she found herself staring out at the Paris skyline, trying to make sense of the last 2 days. How had she gone from her normal, struggling life to being in Paris with a man who could apparently buy and sell her hometown without batting an eye? A penny for your thoughts. Elena turned to find Damien standing behind her, looking slightly less formal than yesterday in dark jeans and a light blue button-down shirt that accentuated his striking blue eyes. I think they're worth a bit more than that, Elena replied, a hint of challenge in her voice. Especially to a billionaire. Damien's expression shifted, a flicker of what might have been guilt crossing his features. You've been doing some research. My brother did, actually. Elena crossed her arms, her voice laced with sarcasm. Were you ever going to tell me? Or was watching the clueless nurse fumble through your world too entertaining? Elena, no. Damien stepped closer, his voice earnest. It wasn't like that at all. Then what was it like? Because from where I'm standing, you've been less than honest with me. Damien ran a hand through his hair, looking surprisingly vulnerable. You're right. I should have been upfront about who I am. He gestured to a nearby couch. Can we sit, please? Elena hesitated, then nodded, keeping a careful distance between them as they sat. When you first walked onto that plane, Damien began, I was intrigued. You clearly had no idea who I was, which almost never happens anymore. And then you told me about your life. Your real life with real problems and challenges. And he paused, searching for the right words. I wanted to stay in that space where I was just a person to you, not a headline or a net worth figure. So, you lied to me. I didn't lie, Damien countered. I just didn't volunteer information. That would have changed how you saw me. That's splitting hairs, Damien. Maybe. He looked at her directly, his gaze unwavering. But can you honestly tell me you would have been as open with me yesterday if you'd known the full story? Elena wanted to say yes, but she knew it wasn't true. She would have been guarded, self-conscious, probably even suspicious of his motives. That's not the point, she said instead, trying to keep her voice steady. The point is that I deserved the chance to make that choice for myself. You're right, Damien admitted, his shoulders slumping slightly. I'm sorry, Elena. Truly. His apology seemed sincere, and despite her anger, Elena found herself softening. Why did you do it, really? Damien was quiet for a moment, looking out at the Paris skyline. For the past year, ever since Mark died, people have treated me differently. Like I'm made of glass, or like I'm nothing but a walking checkbook. My business partners tiptoe around me, afraid I'll walk away from the company. Women approach me with dollar signs in their eyes. He turned back to Elena, his gaze intense. And then there was you, exhausted, annoyed, completely unimpressed by me or my plane or any of it. It was refreshing. So, I was a novelty? Elena said flatly, her voice betraying her hurt. No. Damien shook his head firmly. You were real in a way that almost nothing in my life has felt since Mark died. Yesterday, showing you Paris, talking to you, it was the first time in a year that I didn't feel like I was just going through the motions. There was such raw honesty in his voice that Elena found it hard to maintain her anger. Still, she wasn't ready to let him off the hook completely. You should have told me. I know, Damien nodded, acknowledging his mistake. And I was going to tonight at dinner. I just wanted one more day of being just Damien to you. Elena studied his face, searching for any signs of manipulation or dishonesty, but she found only genuine regret and something else. A vulnerability that seemed at odds with his public image as a tech titan. I don't know what to say, she finally admitted, feeling completely conflicted. Say you'll still have lunch with me, Damien suggested, a hopeful note creeping into his voice. And dinner before your flight. Let me make it up to you. Elena knew the sensible thing would be to walk away now, to protect herself from getting any more entangled with this complicated man and the confusing feelings he stirred within her. But the thought of spending her last day in Paris alone seemed unbearably sad. Okay, she agreed cautiously. Lunch. But I want you to be honest with me from now on. No more convenient omissions. Deal. Damien's relief was palpable. Complete honesty from here on out. Lunch was at a small cafe overlooking the Seine, far from the luxury hotel and the touristy areas of Paris. As they ate simple but delicious French food, Damien answered all of Elena's questions about his life. He told her about growing up with wealthy but emotionally distant parents, about meeting Mark at MIT where they'd bonded over their shared interest in computer security, and about the wild early days of their company. We were living on ramen noodles and working 20-hour days, he recalled with a small smile. Even after we got our first big investment, we kept our office in Mark's garage for another 6 months. We were too busy coding to bother moving. When did you know? Elena asked, genuinely curious about his relationship with Mark. There was this moment, Damien said, his eyes distant with memory. We just signed our first government contract. Mark and I went to this dive bar we used to hang out at in college and ordered the cheapest beer on the menu, same as always. The bartender recognized us from a story in the business section of the newspaper and tried to give us champagne on the house. Mark just laughed and said, "We're still beer guys. Maybe always will be." Damien's face clouded over with a familiar sadness. That was Mark, always grounded, always authentic. After he died, I lost that anchor. Is that why you've been traveling so much? Elena asked gently, trying to understand what motivated him. To find a new anchor? Damien looked at her with surprise, as if she'd articulated something he hadn't quite figured out himself. Maybe. I've been calling it clearing my head. But yes, I think that's exactly what I've been trying to do. They spent the afternoon walking along the Seine, talking with an ease that belied their short acquaintance. Elena found that knowing the truth about Damien actually made it easier to connect with him. The invisible barrier that his secret had created was gone, allowing a new kind of intimacy to develop between them. Can I ask you something personal? Damien said as they paused on a bridge to watch a tour boat pass below them. After everything we've talked about today, I think that's allowed. Elena replied with a small smile. Why haven't you moved on from that hospital in New Jersey? With your skills and experience, you could work anywhere, make more money. Elena leaned against the railing, considering the question thoughtfully. It's complicated. After my parents died, I needed stability for Tommy. Changing jobs, maybe moving to a new city. It just seemed like too much upheaval when our lives had already been turned upside down. And now, Tommy's 18, almost in college. She sighed, her voice tinged with resignation. Now there's the financial reality. I've been at Memorial long enough to have decent seniority, good shifts. Starting over somewhere else might mean more money eventually, but in the short term it would be a risk. And I can't afford risks right now, not with Tommy's tuition to think about. Damien nodded thoughtfully, acknowledging the weight of her responsibilities. You've sacrificed a lot for your brother. It's not a sacrifice when it's someone you love, Elena said simply, dismissing the notion that she had somehow suffered. Still, Damien persisted, his blue eyes searching hers. Don't you ever think about what you want for yourself? Dreams you've put on hold? The question hit closer to home than Elena was comfortable with. Of course, she had dreams. Travel, further education, maybe even a relationship someday with someone who understood her complicated life. But those things had seemed so far out of reach for so long that she'd gotten used to not thinking about them. Sometimes, she admitted quietly, her voice barely above a whisper, but dreams don't pay the bills. They could, Damien said softly, his words hanging in the air. With the right support. Elena tensed immediately, understanding exactly what he was suggesting. I don't want your money, Damien, she said firmly, drawing a line in the sand. I know you don't, he replied quickly, his hands held up in a gesture of peace. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? Elena asked, confused and wary. Damien seemed to struggle with his words, which was unusual for him. I meant that maybe there's a way for you to have both stability and dreams. Before Elena could respond, a street musician nearby began playing a hauntingly beautiful melody on a violin. The moment shifted, the conversation suspended in the delicate notes of the music. As evening approached, they made their way to Montmartre, climbing the winding steps to the highest point in Paris. The city spread out below them, beginning to twinkle with lights as the sky gradually darkened. "Your flight leaves in 3 hours," Damien said, breaking the comfortable silence that had fallen between them. "We should probably head back to the hotel soon, so you can get your things." Elena nodded, a heaviness settling in her chest at the thought of leaving. These 2 days in Paris with Damien had been like a beautiful dream, but reality was waiting for her back home. Hospital shifts, bills, and the day-to-day struggles that defined her life. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice filled with gratitude. "For everything. This has been more than I ever imagined." "Elena." Damien turned to face her, his expression unreadable in the twilight. "What if you didn't get on that plane tonight?" Elena blinked in surprise, completely taken aback by his unexpected question. "What? Stay," he said, the word holding more weight than its single syllable suggested. "Stay in Paris with me." "Damien, I can't just—" "Why not?" He stepped closer, his eyes searching hers, pleading. "Tommy's with your aunt. You're not on shift until Monday evening. That's 2 more days." Elena's heart raced at the sheer possibility. 2 more days in Paris. 2 more days with Damien. "I don't know," she stammered, her mind reeling. "I have a house here," Damien continued, pressing his case. "Just outside the city. It's peaceful. We could go there, spend some time away from everything, get to know each other better." The offer was incredibly tempting, so tempting that Elena almost said yes immediately. But a warning voice in the back of her mind held her back. "Damien, we live in completely different worlds," she said gently, her voice laced with caution. "Whatever this is between us, it can't go anywhere real. Why not?" He challenged, his expression growing more intense. "Because I have money and you don't? That's just a circumstance, Elena, not a definition of who we are." "It's not that simple and you know it," Elena countered, pulling back slightly. "Your life is private jets and luxury hotels and business empires. Mine is hospital shifts and student loans and making ends meet." "Those are just details," Damien insisted, reaching out and taking her hands in his. "They don't have to define us or what we could be to each other." Elena pulled her hands away, suddenly afraid of how much she wanted to believe him. "They're not just details, Damien. They're realities. And the reality is that I have responsibilities that I can't walk away from. Not even for this." She gestured between them, not quite able to put a name to what this was. Attraction, connection, the beginning of something that might be love if given time to grow. Damien's face fell, disappointment clear in his eyes. "I understand responsibilities, Elena. I'm not asking you to abandon them. I'm just asking for a little more time." "Time for what?" Elena asked, her voice barely above a whisper, her heart pounding in her chest. "Time to see if what I'm feeling for you is real," Damien answered honestly, his eyes filled with a depth of emotion that took her breath away. "Because it feels real, Elena. More real than anything has felt in a very long time." Elena's breath caught in her throat, overwhelmed by the intensity in his eyes and the vulnerability in his voice. They mirrored the confusing storm of emotions raging within her own heart. "I'm scared," she admitted, the words slipping out before she could stop them. "Of what?" Damien asked softly, reaching out to touch her face. "Of letting myself believe in this, in you, in us." Elena took a shaky breath, struggling to articulate her fears. "What happens when I go back to real life, and you realize that the struggling nurse from New Jersey doesn't fit into your world after all?" "That won't happen," Damien said firmly, his voice filled with conviction. "You can't know that," Elena countered, her voice laced with doubt. "I know how I feel when I'm with you," Damien said, moving closer again. "I know that for the first time since Mark died. I'm thinking about the future instead of just trying to escape the past." He reached up and touched her cheek gently, his touch sending a shiver down her spine. Stay, Elena. Not forever. Just 2 more days. See where this might lead. Elena closed her eyes, leaning slightly into his touch, wanting more than anything to believe him. Everything in her wanted to say yes, to grab this unexpected chance at something beautiful and hold on for dear life. She felt cornered, but she'd spent 2 solid years playing the responsible adult, constantly prioritizing everyone else's needs above her own desires. Could she really be this selfish, just this once? She wondered. But what about Tommy? She blurted out, her practical side stubbornly rearing its head even at this moment. Just give him a call, Damien suggested, his tone reassuring. Make sure he's okay with your aunt for a couple more days. I can easily arrange for you to be back by Monday afternoon. Plenty of time to get ready before your shift. It was a perfectly reasonable solution, directly addressing her primary concern. What was truly holding her back now was simply fear. An overwhelming fear of the unknown, the fear of getting hurt, and the fear of somehow losing herself within Damien's captivating world. Elena hesitated, feeling like she was standing on the very edge of a significant decision, one that felt momentous in ways she couldn't quite put into words. The lights of Paris seemed to wink at her encouragingly from below, as if the city itself was playfully urging her to seize this incredible opportunity, to embrace something unexpected and potentially wonderful, even if it was just for a little while. Okay, she finally whispered, barely audible. 2 more days. The smile that erupted across Damien's face was like a glorious sunrise, radiating warmth and overflowing with unspoken promise. He gently pulled her into his arms, holding her close as if she were the most delicate and precious thing he'd ever encountered. You absolutely won't regret this, he murmured softly against her hair. Elena wasn't entirely convinced that was true, but as she stood there embraced in his arms, with the magical city of Paris spread out like a breathtaking panorama below them and the stars beginning to twinkle in the night sky above, she knew one thing with unwavering certainty. She would have deeply regretted walking away from this. As they made their way back down the hill, hand in hand, Elena felt an undeniable sense of transformation, as if she was stepping into a brand new chapter of her life, a life where her most cherished dreams weren't just distant and unattainable impossibilities, but real, tangible things that were finally within her reach. From the car, she called Tommy, carefully explaining her change of plans without divulging any of the complex details about her growing feelings for Damien. To her immense surprise, her brother was incredibly supportive and enthusiastic. Are you kidding me? Stay in Paris. Aunt Carol is doing great, and I've got a study group to keep me busy all weekend anyway, he exclaimed. There was a brief pause. Then Tommy added in a more serious and heartfelt tone, You really deserve this, Elena. You've put your life on hold for me long enough. His words struck a chord within her, bringing an unexpected rush of tears to her eyes. When had her little brother become so remarkably perceptive, so genuinely mature? I love you, Tommy, she said, her voice thick with emotion. Love you too, sis. Now go have an amazing adventure. And take tons of pictures. After hanging up the phone, Elena glanced over at Damien, who was pointedly pretending not to listen to her conversation. Tommy says I should definitely stay, she told him, a small, genuine smile playing on her lips. Smart kid, Damien replied, his eyes filled with warmth as they met hers. Must run in the family. Instead of heading back to the hotel as planned, Damien directed the driver to take them straight to his house in the French countryside. As they left the dazzling city lights behind, Elena felt a peculiar mix of excitement and nervous anticipation fluttering in her stomach. What exactly had she just agreed to? 2 more days with a man she'd known for less than 48 hours. A man who lived in a world that was entirely different from her own. A man who, despite his immense wealth and status, seemed just as lost and searching as she was. The car turned onto a long, tree-lined driveway, softly illuminated by discreet landscape lighting. At the very end stood a magnificent stone house that looked like it had stood there for centuries, though Elena could tell from the modernized windows and other details that it had been extensively renovated and updated. Home sweet home? Damien said as the car finally came to a smooth stop. At least one of them is. How many homes do you have? Elena asked, her curiosity genuinely piqued. Damien looked slightly sheepish and a bit embarrassed. A few apartments in New York, a house in Malibu, a chalet in Aspen, this place, and the penthouse in Boston where I actually spend most of my time. Wow, Elena said, trying to imagine owning even one home, let alone 5. It's excessive, I know, Damien admitted, helping her out of the car. Mark used to give me a really hard time about it. He kept the same humble 2-bedroom apartment even after we were worth billions. He sounds like he was a truly good friend, Elena said softly. The best? Damien agreed, a sad smile briefly crossing his face. He would have liked you, Elena, very much. The house was just as breathtaking on the inside as it was on the outside, elegant, yet remarkably comfortable, with a stunning mix of antique furniture and modern amenities. A friendly housekeeper greeted them warmly, seemingly unsurprised by their somewhat sudden arrival. Madame Bertrand always keeps the house ready for me, Damien explained as the older woman took their coats with a gracious smile. She lives in the guest house with her husband, who manages the grounds and keeps everything looking beautiful. After a light and delicious dinner prepared by Madame Bertrand, Damien gave Elena a personal tour of the expansive house. The library, with its floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and inviting reading nooks, was by far her favorite room. "This is absolutely amazing," she said, gently running her fingers along the spines of the beautifully bound, leather-covered classics. "I could literally spend days in here." "You're more than welcome to," Damien said, watching her with a fond expression that made her heart flutter unexpectedly. "There's a guest room all prepared for you upstairs, the blue door at the end of the hall." Elena's cheeks flushed slightly at the implicit suggestion that they would be sleeping in separate rooms. Of course they would be. They'd only known each other for all of 2 days. But something in the subtle way Damien had phrased it made her wonder if he'd at least been briefly considering other, more intimate arrangements. The mere thought sent a thrilling shiver of anticipation through her, a feeling that she tried her best to ignore. Later that night, as she settled into the luxurious guest room with its dreamy canopy bed and a breathtaking view of the moonlit garden, Elena found herself wondering, not for the first time, what she had truly gotten herself into. This entire experience felt like something straight out of a fairy tale. The ordinary girl swept away into a dazzling world of unimaginable luxury and unexpected romance by a handsome, wealthy, and utterly captivating man. But fairy tales weren't real, and the harsh realities of real life had a way of always reasserting themselves eventually. In just 2 short days, she would be back in New Jersey, back to her ordinary, everyday life. And what then? Would Damien Carter, billionaire tech CEO, truly want to continue whatever this was with a nurse who could barely make ends meet and whose life was so drastically different from his? As she drifted off to sleep, Elena repeatedly told herself not to get too attached, not to believe too much in this incredibly beautiful fantasy. But her heart, already beginning to fall for the complicated and intriguing man down the hall, simply wasn't listening. Elena woke to the warm and inviting sunlight streaming through the large windows of her guest room. For a moment, she remained perfectly still, simply taking in her elegant surroundings. The antique furniture, the luxurious silk curtains, and the plush carpet beneath her bare feet. As she finally slid out of bed, it felt like she had somehow stepped into someone else's life. The life of someone who truly belonged in beautiful French country houses with intriguing billionaires just down the hall. After a refreshing shower in the spacious marble bathroom that was easily bigger than her entire apartment bathroom back home, Elena dressed in a simple yet elegant sundress from the clothes that Damien had thoughtfully bought for her. She made her way downstairs, following the tempting scent of freshly brewed coffee and warm bread. She found Damien in the sun-drenched kitchen, dressed casually in jeans and a light sweater, engaged in a lively conversation with Madame Bertrand in fluent French. He looked up as Elena entered the room, his entire face instantly brightening with a warm and genuine smile. "Good morning," he said, switching effortlessly to English. "Did you sleep well?" "Better than I have in years," Elena admitted with a sincere smile. "Your house is absolutely beautiful." "Our home for the next 2 days," Damien replied, pulling out a chair for her at the kitchen table, where a delicious breakfast was already laid out. "I thought we could take it easy today." There's a charming farmer's market in the village if you'd like to explore, or we could just relax here. The gardens are particularly lovely this time of year. The casual and comfortable way he spoke about their time together, as if it were the most natural thing in the world for her to be here with him, made Elena's heart flutter with a mix of excitement and nervous anticipation. It was undeniably dangerous, this feeling. How quickly she was becoming accustomed to his presence, his undivided attention, and his extraordinary world. The market sounds nice, she said, helping herself to a perfectly golden croissant that looked and smelled absolutely heavenly. I've never actually been to a real French farmer's market before. Then that's exactly what we'll do, Damien said, pouring her a steaming cup of coffee. After breakfast, of course. The village was like something straight out of a postcard, with its picturesque stone buildings adorned with colorful flower boxes in the windows, narrow cobbled streets, and a charming central square where local farmers and talented artisans had set up their bustling stalls. Damien seemed to know everyone, greeting the villagers by name and warmly introducing Elena as his friend from America. The easy way he navigated the simpler world, so vastly different from his usual realm of private jets and luxury hotels, genuinely surprised her. You seem very comfortable here, she observed as they browsed a stall selling local honey. More so than you did in Paris, even. Damien nodded thoughtfully, a contemplative expression on his face. This place, it feels real in a way that much of my life simply isn't. The people here don't care about Denmark's stock price, or who I'm dating, or what the business blogs are saying about me. Is that why you bought a house here? To escape? Partly, Damien admitted, paying for a jar of honey without even attempting to haggle over the price. But also because it reminds me of summers when I was a kid. Before my parents got divorced, we used to rent a small place in the French countryside. It's one of the few happy memories I have of us all together. Elena felt herself softening even further toward him. Behind all the immense wealth and undeniable success was a man with his own personal scars, his own complicated past, and his own hidden vulnerabilities. What about you? Damien asked as they continued their leisurely walk. Any happy childhood memories that you hold on to? Elena paused for a moment, lost in thought. My dad used to take Tommy and me camping every summer. Nothing fancy, just a tent in the state park about an hour from our house. We'd fish and tell spooky ghost stories around the crackling campfire. She smiled fondly at the nostalgic memory. My mom would always pack way too much food and insist that we call her every single night to make sure we hadn't been eaten alive by bears. Were there actually bears? Damien asked, grinning playfully. Maybe one or two, Elena laughed. But they were generally more interested in the overflowing campground dumpsters than they were in us. They spent the entire morning wandering through the vibrant market, carefully selecting fresh bread, flavorful cheeses, and an assortment of ripe fruit for a delicious picnic lunch. The villagers treated them like any other ordinary couple, with no hint that they recognized Damien as anything other than a friendly American who owned a beautiful house nearby. It was liberating in a way that Elena hadn't expected, to simply be Elena and Damien, two people enjoying a beautiful day together, with no complicated past or uncertain future clouding the present moment. After exploring the market, Damien drove them to a secluded spot by a gently flowing river, where ancient willow trees provided ample shade from the midday sun. They carefully spread a soft blanket on the lush green grass and unpacked their delightful market purchases. This is absolutely perfect, Elena sighed contentedly, leaning back on her elbows and tilting her face toward the dappled sunlight filtering softly through the leaves. Yes, it is, Damien agreed, though when she glanced at him, she realized he wasn't looking at the idyllic scenery, but directly at her. The intensity in his gaze made her cheeks flush slightly. You're staring, she pointed out, suddenly feeling self-conscious. Sorry, Damien said, though he didn't look the least bit sorry. It's just, you look happy, genuinely relaxed. It suits you. I am happy, Elena admitted, surprising herself with the simple truth of it. Happier than I've been in a very long time. Good, Damien said softly. That's all I truly want. They ate their simple yet satisfying feast, talking about everything and nothing at all. Favorite books and movies, places they'd always dreamed of visiting, childhood ambitions and long-forgotten dreams. It felt both utterly ordinary and completely extraordinary at the very same time, this easy and effortless conversation between them. After lunch, they strolled along the river hand in hand. Elena couldn't remember the last time she'd held hands with someone, probably not since her brief and unremarkable relationship with a fellow nursing student years ago. It felt good, this simple human connection, this quiet intimacy. "Tell me something real," Damien said suddenly as they paused to watch a family of ducks serenely paddle past. "Something you haven't told anyone else." Elena carefully considered the request. "Sometimes I resent Tommy," she admitted, the words feeling both incredibly difficult and somehow profoundly necessary. "Not him exactly, but the responsibility. I was only 24 years old when our parents died. I had plans, big dreams, a promising job offer at a prestigious research hospital in Boston." She sighed deeply. "I gave it all up without a moment's hesitation because Tommy desperately needed me. And I don't regret it. Not really. But sometimes I can't help but wonder what my life would have been like if things had been different." Damien squeezed her hand gently, his touch reassuring. "That doesn't make you a bad person, Elena. It simply makes you human." "Your turn," she said, relieved by his lack of judgment. "Tell me something real." Damien was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the calm water. "I blame myself for Mark's death," he finally said, his voice low and heavy with unspoken grief. "We were supposed to go on that climbing trip together. It was an annual tradition, our way of disconnecting from work and just being friends again. But I canceled at the very last minute because of an important client meeting." His jaw tightened visibly. "If I had been there, maybe I could have prevented the accident. Or maybe you would have been in the accident too," Elena said gently. "You simply can't know what would have happened." "That's what my therapist says," Damien admitted with a sad smile. "But knowing it logically doesn't really change how I feel." Elena understood that all too well. How many times had she wondered if she could have somehow saved her parents if she'd been home that fateful weekend instead of picking up an extra shift at the hospital. "Grief isn't logical," she said softly, wrapping her arms around his waist and resting her head against his chest. "And neither is guilt." Damien held her close, his heart beating steadily beneath her ear. For a long moment, they simply stood there by the river, two wounded souls finding solace and comfort in each other's understanding. That evening, they cooked dinner together in the spacious kitchen, a simple pasta dish with fresh ingredients from the local market. Elena was pleasantly surprised to discover that Damien actually knew his way around a kitchen. "Mark's mom taught us both to cook back in college," he explained as he expertly chopped garlic. "She said that no son of hers, biological or honorary, was going to live on nothing but ramen noodles and takeout." "She sounds like a truly wise woman," Elena said, grating Parmesan cheese. Damien agreed. "She died about 5 years ago from cancer." He paused in his chopping, his expression clouding over with sadness. "Mark took it really hard. He was an only child, and after his dad left when he was just a kid, it was just the two of them." "I'm so sorry," Elena said softly. Damien nodded, then continued preparing the meal. "That's why I understood at least a little bit what you were going through with Tommy. Mark talked a lot about what it was like losing his only parent, how it changed absolutely everything." The parallels between their experiences struck Elena in a new and profound way. Despite their vastly different circumstances, there was a core of shared understanding between them, a shared experience of loss, of responsibility, of having to completely redefine who you were in the difficult aftermath of tragedy. After dinner, they settled in the inviting library with glasses of wine, sitting close together on a comfortable sofa. A warm fire crackled merrily in the fireplace, casting a cozy glow over the room. "This doesn't feel real," Elena confessed, looking around at the beautiful room with its seemingly endless shelves of leather-bound books. "Being here with you, like this, it is real," Damien assured her, his arm draped casually across her shoulders. "Maybe more real than anything else in my life right now. But tomorrow I go back to New Jersey," Elena reminded him. "Back to long hospital shifts and mounting bills and real life." Damien was quiet for a moment, swirling the wine thoughtfully in his glass. "What if there was a way to combine our worlds?" he finally asked. "Your real life and Whatever this is between us. Elena's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? I mean, Damien set his glass down and turned to face her directly. Elena, I know we've only known each other for 3 days. I know this is all happening incredibly fast, and it's probably crazy, but there's something between us that I haven't felt in a very long time, maybe ever. And I absolutely don't want to lose it when you get on that plane tomorrow. I don't want to lose it either, Elena admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. But I just don't see how this works, Damien. Your life is here and in Boston and New York and wherever your business takes you. Mine is in New Jersey with Tommy and my job. I can come to New Jersey, Damien said, as if it were the most obvious and simple solution in the world. I can work from anywhere, and you could visit me sometimes on weekends on your days off. The idea was incredibly tempting. So tempting that Elena was almost afraid to believe it could actually be real. Long-distance relationships are hard enough when both people live relatively normal lives, she pointed out. Add in all of our differences and I just don't know. What differences? Damien challenged, gently taking her hands in his. So I have money and you don't. So what? That's just circumstance, not character. It's not just the money, Elena tried to explain. It's the vastly different worlds we live in, the expectations, the possibilities. Tell me what you're really afraid of, Damien said softly. Elena looked deeply into his eyes, finding the courage to be completely honest. I'm afraid that once the novelty wears off, once you've had your fill of real life with the struggling nurse from New Jersey, you'll simply move on, and I'll be left picking up the pieces of my heart while you jet off to your next exciting adventure. Damien's expression softened with genuine understanding. Elena, you're not a novelty to me. You're... He paused, searching for the precise words to express what he truly felt. You're like coming up for air after being underwater for far too long. You make me feel alive again, connected, like maybe there's still good in the world worth fighting for. His heartfelt words touched something deep inside her, a place that had been closed off and guarded since her parents had passed away, a place where hope still stubbornly resided. I'm scared, she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. Me too, Damien confessed, surprising her. I'm terrified of messing this up, of not being good enough for you, of dragging you into a world that might hurt you. But I'm even more afraid of letting you go without even trying to make this work. He reached up to cup her face gently in his hands. I'm not asking for any promises, Elena. I'm just asking for a chance. For both of us. The incredible tenderness in his touch, the unwavering sincerity in his voice. It was Elena's undoing. She leaned forward, closing the small distance between them, and pressed her lips softly to his. Damien responded immediately, his arms wrapping tightly around her as he deepened the kiss. It was gentle at first, then increasingly passionate, as if they were both desperately trying to communicate everything they couldn't yet express in words. When they finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Damien rested his forehead gently against hers. Is that a yes? He asked, a hint of his usual confidence returning to his voice. Elena smiled, feeling lighter than she had in years. Let's try, she clarified. One day at a time. I'll absolutely take it, Damien murmured before kissing her again, softly but with an intensity that spoke volumes. Later that night, as they stood at the threshold of her guest room, there was a brief moment of uncertainty. The undeniable attraction between them was palpable, but Elena simply wasn't ready to take that significant step just yet. Not when everything was still so new and so fragile. Good night, Damien, she said softly, placing a gentle kiss on his cheek. He seemed to understand completely without her having to explain. Good night, Elena, he replied, squeezing her hand gently before finally letting her go. Sweet dreams. As she closed the door behind her, Elena leaned against it, her heart overflowing with conflicting emotions. Excitement, fear, hope, and something even deeper that she wasn't quite ready to fully name or acknowledge. Their last day in France dawned bright and clear. They spent it exploring the picturesque countryside surrounding Damien's house, visiting a small, charming chateau, having a leisurely lunch at a centuries-old vineyard, and walking hand in hand through vast fields of vibrant wildflowers that stretched as far as the eye could see. It was a perfect day, made bittersweet by the undeniable knowledge that it would inevitably end with Elena on a plane back to New Jersey. As the afternoon waned, they returned to the house to collect Elena's few belongings before the inevitable drive to the airport. In her room, she found a small, beautifully wrapped package on the bed, with a handwritten note in Damien's unmistakable handwriting. Something to remember our time in Paris. D. Inside was a delicate silver necklace with a small pendant shaped like the Eiffel Tower. It was stunningly beautiful, but not overly ostentatious. Exactly the kind of thing Elena would have chosen for herself if she could have afforded such a luxury. She put it on immediately, the pendant resting just above her heart. It felt absolutely right there, a tangible reminder of these magical days. Downstairs, Damien was waiting patiently in the foyer, her backpack already in his hand. His face lit up with a warm smile when he saw the necklace adorning her neck. "You like it?" he asked, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "It's perfect," Elena assured him, touching the pendant gently. "Thank you." The drive to the airport was relatively quiet, both of them lost in their own complex thoughts. As they approached the bustling terminal, Damien finally broke the heavy silence. "I've arranged for a private lounge where we can wait until it's time for you to board," he said. "Unless you'd prefer the main terminal, of course." Elena shook her head. "The lounge is fine." The thought of having to say goodbye to Damien in a crowded and impersonal airport terminal was simply too much to bear. The private lounge was luxurious, yet tastefully decorated, with comfortable seating and large windows that offered a panoramic view of the busy runways. A discreet staff member quietly took Elena's boarding pass, promising to let them know the moment it was time for her to board her flight. Once they were finally alone, Damien pulled Elena gently into his arms, holding her close as if he was trying desperately to memorize the feel of her. "I've arranged for a car to meet you at JFK, he said softly against her hair. "It will take you straight home." "You really didn't have to do that," Elena protested weakly. "I wanted to," Damien replied, pulling back slightly to look directly into her eyes. "It's the very least I could do." "When will I see you again?" Elena asked, finally voicing the question that had been weighing heavily on her mind all day. "I have meetings in Boston through Wednesday," Damien said. "But I could easily fly to New Jersey on Thursday evening, if that works for you." The idea that he would rearrange his entire schedule just to see her so soon made Elena's heart swell with a mixture of joy and disbelief. "Thursday would be perfect. I'm off on Friday." "Then it's a date," Damien said, a wide smile spreading across his face. "Our first official date. What would you call the past 3 days, then?" Elena asked, playfully raising an eyebrow. "The prologue," Damien replied, kissing her lightly. "The best prologue I've ever read." The announcement that her flight was boarding came far too soon. As they walked slowly toward the gate, Damien kept a possessive arm wrapped securely around her waist, as if he was reluctant to let her go, even for a single moment. At the security checkpoint, the furthest point Damien could accompany her, they stopped. This was it. The end of their unexpected fairy tale interlude and the uncertain beginning of whatever was to come next. "Call me when you land," Damien said, his voice noticeably rough with emotion. "I don't care what time it is. I need to know that you're safe." "I will," Elena promised, fighting back the overwhelming tears that threatened to spill over. Why was this so incredibly hard? She'd only known him for 3 days, but they hadn't been ordinary days. They had been days of profound connection, of genuine understanding, of finding something neither of them had been actively looking for, but both desperately needed. "Elenina," Damien said, cupping her face in his hands. "These past 3 days have been. I don't even have the words to describe what they've been." "Life-changing," Elenina offered, managing a weak smile despite the lump in her throat. "Exactly," Damien agreed. "And I want you to know that whatever happens next, whatever challenges we face trying to make this work, I'm all in 100%. The sincerity in his voice and the intensity in his eyes left no room for doubt. Whatever this thing was between them, Damien felt it just as deeply as she did. "I'm all in, too," Elenina whispered, surprised by how honest the words felt. Damien, also taken aback by the depth of her commitment, pulled her close for one last kiss. It was deep, passionate, and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, he pressed his forehead to hers. "This isn't goodbye," he said firmly. "It's just see you soon." "See you soon?" Evelina echoed, forcing herself to step back, to turn away, to walk towards security and away from the most incredible 3 days of her life. As she handed her boarding pass to the security officer, Evelina glanced back one last time. Damien was still standing where she'd left him, watching her go with an expression that made her heart ache in the best possible way. The flight back to New York felt surreal. Evelina sat in first class, Damien's doing, of course, surrounded by business travelers and wealthy tourists. Just 3 days ago, she would have felt completely out of place. Now, she simply reclined her seat and closed her eyes, remembering Parisian streets, countryside picnics, and the feel of Damien's hand in hers. When the plane landed at JFK, it was late evening. As promised, a driver was waiting with a sign bearing her name. The Blacktown car that whisked her through New York traffic and across the bridge to New Jersey was a stark contrast to the bus she would normally have taken. True to her word, she called Damien as soon as she was in the car. "You landed safely?" he asked, answering on the first ring. "Yes, just now. The car is very nice. Thank you." "You're welcome," Damien said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "How was the flight?" "Lonely," Evelina admitted. "I kept turning to tell you something and remembering you weren't there." "I know exactly what you mean," Damien said softly. "My house feels empty without you in it." They talked until the car pulled up in front of Evelina's modest apartment building. The contrast between Damien's world and hers had never been more obvious than at that moment. The luxury car idling outside the slightly run-down building where she rented a 2-bedroom walk-up. "I'm home," she told Damien, a touch of self-consciousness creeping into her voice. "I should go. Tommy's probably waiting up." "Of course," Damien said. "Call me tomorrow." "I will," Evelina promised. "Good night, Damien." "Good night, Evelina. Sweet dreams." As she climbed the stairs to her apartment, Evelina felt like she was moving between worlds, from the fairy tale of Paris and Damien back to the reality of her everyday life. Tommy was indeed waiting up, eager to hear all about her unexpected adventure. As she told him a carefully edited version of the past 3 days, Evelina found herself touching the Eiffel Tower pendant around her neck, a tangible reminder that it hadn't all been a dream. Later, lying in her own familiar bed, so different from the luxurious accommodations she'd grown accustomed to, Evelina stared at the ceiling, wondering how she would ever reconcile these two parts of her life. How could Damien Carter, with his private jets and country estates, ever truly fit into her world of hospital shifts and budget concerns? And yet, as she drifted off to sleep, she found herself not worried, but hopeful, because underneath all the external differences, she and Damien had connected on a level that transcended wealth or status. They had seen each other, really seen each other, in a way that felt rare and precious. Thursday couldn't come soon enough. The next few days passed in a blur of normalcy that felt anything but normal to Evelina. She went back to work at the hospital, did laundry, helped Tommy with college applications, and paid bills. But through it all, there was a new lightness in her step, a glow that her colleagues noticed and commented on. "What happened on that trip?" her friend Megan asked during their lunch break. "You're different." "Good different or bad different?" Evelina asked, unable to suppress a smile. "Good," Megan decided, studying her face. "Really good. Like you've woken up or something." That was exactly how it felt. Like Evelina had been sleepwalking through her life for the past 2 years and had suddenly opened her eyes to find the world brighter, more vibrant, full of possibilities she'd forgotten existed. She and Damien talked every day, sometimes just quick calls to say good morning or good night, sometimes hour-long conversations that left her smiling long after they'd ended. He was in Boston for meetings, as he'd said, but he sent her photos of his day and asked about hers, creating a bridge between their separate lives. On Thursday morning, Evelina woke to a text from Damien. "Can't wait to see you tonight. My flight lands at 6 o'clock. Dinner at 7:30? She texted back immediately. Can't wait either. 7:30 is perfect. As she got ready for work, Elenina found herself wondering what Damien would think of her apartment, her neighborhood, her real life. Would he be put off by the simplicity of it all? Would he finally realize how different their worlds truly were? But as she touched the silver pendant that hadn't left her neck since he'd given it to her, Elenina pushed those doubts aside. Damien had seen who she was from the beginning: tired nurse, responsible sister, ordinary woman with ordinary problems. And he'd chosen her anyway. That evening, Elenina took extra care with her appearance, settling on a simple blue dress that brought out her eyes and the silver Eiffel Tower necklace that now meant so much to her. Tommy, who had been surprisingly supportive of her budding relationship with Damien, gave her a thumbs up as she emerged from her bedroom. You look great, sis, he said sincerely. Billionaire guy won't know what hit him. His name is Damien, Elenina reminded him, though she couldn't help but smile at her brother's enthusiasm. And please try not to call him billionaire guy to his face. No promises, Tommy teased, then grew more serious. He makes you happy, doesn't he? Elenina nodded, touched by her brother's concern. He does. It's new and complicated and probably a little crazy. But yes, he makes me happy. Then that's all that matters, Tommy said with a wisdom beyond his 18 years. After everything you've done for me, you deserve to be happy, Elenina. Before she could respond, there was a knock at the door. Elenina's heart leaped. Damien was early. She opened the door to find him standing there, looking slightly less polished than usual in jeans and a casual button-down shirt, holding a bouquet of wildflowers similar to those they'd walked through in the French countryside. Hi, he said, his eyes taking in the sight of her with an appreciation that made her blush. Hi yourself, Elenina replied, stepping back to let him in. You're early. I couldn't wait, Damien admitted, handing her the flowers. These reminded me of our walk. They're beautiful, Elenina said, deeply touched by the thoughtful gesture. Come in. I want you to meet Tommy. As Elenina watched Damien and her brother shake hands and exchange greetings, she was struck by how natural it felt to have him here in her apartment. He didn't look out of place or uncomfortable. He looked right, like he belonged. Nice place, Damien said, glancing around the modest living room with its second-hand furniture and family photos. It's not much, Elenina said, suddenly self-conscious despite herself. It's a home, Damien corrected her gently. A real home. You can feel it the moment you walk in. The simple observation, so sincere and appreciative, eased some of the tension Elenina hadn't even realized she was carrying. This was who Damien was, beneath the wealth and privilege, a man who understood what truly mattered. Exhausted nurse Elena Morris stumbles onto a private jet and into billionaire Damien Carter's world. A twist of fate sends her soaring toward a life she never imagined. But will reality bring her back down? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. They went to a small Italian restaurant in Elenina's neighborhood, a family-owned place where the pasta was homemade and the owner knew Elenina by name. It wasn't fancy or expensive, but the food was excellent and the atmosphere warm and inviting. This is perfect, Damien said as they settled into a corner booth. Exactly the kind of place I was hoping you'd choose. Really? Elenina asked, surprised. I thought you might prefer something more upscale. Damien shook his head. I spend too much time in upscale restaurants with people who only care about being seen. This is much better, somewhere real with someone real. Over dinner, they talked about their days apart, catching up on the details they hadn't shared in their calls and texts. Damien told her about his meetings in Boston, about the challenges of stepping back into a leadership role at the company after months of semi-absence. Mark's death left a huge hole, he explained. Not just personally, but in the company. He was the creative genius behind most of our best products. I'm more of the business guy. And now? Elenina asked. Now I'm trying to find a new path forward, Damien said thoughtfully, for the company and for myself. Being with you these past few days has helped me see things more clearly. How so? You remind me that there's more to life than work, than success, than money, he explained. Watching you talk about your patients, your brother, it's obvious that you find meaning in caring for others. It made me realize that I've been looking for meaning in all the wrong places. The conversation flowed easily as they shared a bottle of wine and a tiramisu for dessert. By the time they left the restaurant, walking hand in hand back to Elenina's apartment, it felt as if they'd been doing this for years rather than having just met less than a week ago. At her door, Damien pulled her close, kissing her with a tenderness that made her heart ache. "When can I see you again?" he asked, his voice husky. "I'm off tomorrow," Elenina reminded him. "And the weekend." "Perfect," Damien said, his eyes lighting up. "I've cleared my schedule for the next 3 days. I thought maybe I could take you somewhere, anywhere you want to go." Elenina smiled, an idea forming. "Actually, there is somewhere I'd like to go, but it's not Paris or Rome or anywhere fancy." "Name it," Damien said immediately. "It's yours." "The state park where my dad used to take us camping," Elenina said. "It's beautiful this time of year. We could rent a cabin for the weekend, hike the trails, sit by the lake." Damien looked surprised, then pleased. "I haven't been camping since college," he admitted, "and never in a cabin." "Sounds perfect." His enthusiasm for her simple suggestion touched Elenina deeply. Here was a man who could take her anywhere in the world, and he was genuinely excited about a weekend in a rustic cabin in a New Jersey state park. "It's settled then," she said, kissing him again. "Our first real vacation together." "The first of many," Damien promised. As he walked away, turning back once to wave before disappearing down the stairs, Elenina felt a sense of certainty wash over her. Whatever challenges lay ahead, and there would be many in this unlikely relationship, they would face them together, because sometimes the wrong plane leads to exactly the right destination, and sometimes the heart finds its home in the most unexpected places. At the top of the stairs in her modest apartment building, with the silver Eiffel Tower pendant warm against her skin, Elenina whispered the words she hadn't yet said aloud, but felt with every fiber of her being. "I love you, Damien Carter." And somewhere across the city, in a luxury hotel suite with a view of the lights of New Jersey across the water, Damien was making plans for a future he'd never imagined, but now couldn't live without a future with Elenina Morris, the woman who had accidentally boarded his private jet and permanently changed the course of his life. The end.